I am just about everywhere you can think of: Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and it's Bev Wells, honestly. And I do no fluff coaching and speaking.
So my first question for you, Bev, is what are some of the obstacles that women go through when it comes to their grief and maybe overcoming it? Actually, not overcoming, identifying it, and why?
Right. So the biggest thing I find is the stigma or the expectation, I guess is a better way to put it. The expectation of women to have to be able to hold it all together for their family, for the community, for the world, basically. We are tasked with being the caregivers and not the care receivers. So it's really hard for women to reach out and ask for help, but it's even harder to find the help that meets them where they are. A lot of traditional therapies work wonders, and sometimes it's just not enough. It's just not a good fit. And so I find that if you go to your traditional therapy or your journaling or your affirmations, sometimes it just scratches the surface and women don't know where to go after that. And they're thinking, well, okay, I did the thing, but I still feel like crap.
As a man hearing that, it's a little bit disappointing because for me, my instincts when I hear that is I want to be the support
Right.
for the woman, right? I want to make her feel safe during it. I want to provide the security during it. What can then maybe the partners of those who are, of the women who are going through this journey, what can they do to help their partner along the path and along the way?
Right. That is probably one of the most brilliant questions I've ever received. I love it. Thank you so much for asking that. I am very blessed at this season in my life where I'm at. I have an amazing husband, and I'm going to say we're going to model how men should handle the grief or the trauma that their partners have gone through the way that my husband does. And that is in a way that is A, non judgmental, and B, not trying to fix it. I'm not saying that he couldn't fix it if he wanted to, but he's very cognizant of the fact that sometimes I just need to be a mess, and he just needs to be able to hold that space and allow that mess to happen. Um, Men are hardwired to fix things. And sometimes that comes across as dismissive, not that it's meant to, but women feel like we're being told how we should be feeling at that moment when the man only just wants to help. So, one of the biggest things partners can do is to just be present, sit in the mud with your partner, and let them have the feelings that they're having, express the feelings that they're having, and then ask, do you need me to do anything? Or do you need me to just be with you? And I think that's the most powerful thing a male partner can do for his wife or spouse.
I agree with you that men are hardwired to fix things. Conflict resolution, right? Come on, babe, tell
Right.
me what's the problem? I got you. I can fix it.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
But
Exactly. Yeah,
sometimes, to your point, we want the ear before we get the voice.
exactly.
Right? Where a
Yeah.
lot of men,
And
we give the voice first before the ear. But you're about to share something. So, what are your thoughts on that? And maybe it being a little bit difficult for men to do the ear first, listening before they voice something.
right. And, I am a human lover. I'm not anti man or anti feminist or any of that stuff. I love all humans equally. And I am very cognizant at this point in my life of the differences between how women process trauma and how men process trauma. And it can be very traumatizing for the spouse, for the husband, to have to hear what their wife may have gone through prior to them or may be going through right now, because we can be, we're very verbal, we're very descriptive. So it can almost be re traumatizing for the husband as well. So, one of the things I highly recommend is for if a spouse, a woman is going through trauma or has been through trauma, and the husband is finding it overwhelming, that they seek their own guidance through a peer, a mentor, a therapist, a coach, whoever it might be. And that will allow them to um, get out what they need to get out. So my wife said this, and I wanted to do this. My wife told me about her first husband who, was very abusive, and I just want to go and beat the living snot out of this man, but I can't. What do I do with all of these feelings? And so it's really important that if the spouse is feeling that way, they go and get their own guidance to make sure that everybody's healthy in the relationship.
I remember a time where I was going through something, and this was maybe last year, so very recent in my relationship. And what I established at that point with all my training, all my education, because Bev, you and I, we have the experiences, we have the wisdom, we have all the training, but we struggle too. So going
Right.
through this,
Yeah.
right? And I think sometimes people forget that because they're used to, on the surface, seeing people coming to us for guidance, but not necessarily seeing us go for other people for guidance. And I preface it that way because what I established was that I said, okay, can I handle this on my own? Can I
Mhm.
soothe myself, right? And when I couldn't, I went to a mentor,
Right.
right? Um, just to say, okay, this is what I'm going through before I went to my partner. Just to say, okay, this is what I'm going through. I want to know how to word it so I can best bring it to her at that point. And then when that couldn't work out, when I couldn't have the conversation with my partner in the way that I did, I waited, but I still wanted to have it with her. What I found, and I'll get your input on this, what I found that some people, when they're going through a traumatic experience, whether it's caused by their partner, their friends, or from their childhood or previously, they either go to their friends or online. They don't give their partner the opportunity. They don't go to the mentor who is trained or the therapist who's trained in this. And I found that to be dangerous because I've seen some relationships fall apart because they went to people who aren't in the relationship for guidance. And you probably seen this online. They're like, girl, leave him. Boy, you know what? You go find another one. Saturday night, where the holes at? Like, their right, their
Yeah,
fix is to get rid of the
100%.
person without giving them the opportunity. Have you seen some people who either come to you or indirectly they have an issue because they went to the wrong person? It made it worse to the point where they've lost everything now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. That was me not so long ago. I was the type that was, I stuff it all down. I'm a stuffer. That's a new word. If you don't know it, I'm a stuffer. And I was totally the human being that was like, you know what? I'm going to cut you off before you have a chance to cut me off. And that was my mentality. So when girlfriends and I would be sitting down or they'd be talking about their spouse, their husband, their boyfriend, I'd be like, sister, you need to walk out that door. Like, no man's worth that. Or, if they can't handle your pain, they can't handle you. That was me. And I still see it absolutely 100%. And the internet is fabulous and it's awful all at the same time. The internet is fabulous because I get to meet people like you and we get to have these real conversations and really cut through all the noise. But it's also awful because it's so easy to just chime in on a comment, you know, hey, I went through that and never again, and you need to do this or you need to do that. And then what happens is you're right. They follow this advice either with their girlfriends or the internet, and they lose everything, or things get way, way worse and get really, really ugly. And so I think people in general need to take the unfiltered comments that they get on a post with a huge grain of salt and really reach out to real live humans in the real world. Like, yes, I'm on socials. I have Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of that. And I do talk about all of these things. But if you were to want to work with me, we'd have to meet like this. We'd have to have conversations like this. I'm also a dog trainer. So part of that comes from that because people reach out to me all the time. Hey, my dog's doing this. What do I do? And in the dog training world, it's very unethical to say, without meeting the dog, without knowing anything, hey, you know, this worked for Fido the other day, so do this. And then the dog gets, injured, or the human gets bit, or something's awful. So that comes naturally to me to say, I'm not giving you advice right now. We need to have a deeper conversation about this. And then we can figure out if we're a good fit.
What do you then think are some of the dangers of people who follow advice from those in their comment section instead of actually giving their partner the opportunity or going to someone who's a little bit, or in many cases, a lot more qualified to assist them through their traumatic experiences?
Right. Well, one of the biggest things is you're not doing your relationship any justice. You're doing a huge disservice to the relationship that you're in to not give your partner the opportunity to show up for you the way that you need them to. Um, you this is one of my biggest things. You don't know unless you ask. And if you can't say to your partner, I have this thing that I need to talk about. Um, and if you don't do that, then that just builds a big wall, right? Then there's this wall, and nobody can get through. You can't get through it, and they can't get through it, and it just creates more and more distance, more and more walls. And yeah, some relationships can withstand that, most cannot.
There's one person on the line. She was going through a traumatic experience. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was 2 years ago, Bev, and one of her friends passed away. I did not, I don't know how he did, but he passed away. And she was going through a traumatic experience. And what she did, she leaned into an online community, not an online community like one of those grief groups or things like
Mhm.
that. It was post after post after post, and people saying that I'm sorry for your loss. And then after a while, what started to happen is that people said that, you know what, if you ever need anyone, I am here. You can come on over, you know what, and I can help you out. The problem is she was married.
Right.
So she ended up in a number of sexual encounters with a number of people that were in her comment section. And as she looked back on that experience, she made a post, I think it was late last year before Christmas. And she was saying that, you know what, I made a lot of mistakes, and I reflected a lot. And I didn't realize how the grief would impact me. And one thing that I remember thinking about is that people sometimes don't realize that grief can take you one way for a lot of people. And for a lot of people, they become someone who is far worse than who they were. And they do things that they can't believe that they would ever do. Yeah, like this young lady. My question to you then is, do we sometimes only glamorize the unity? Oh my God, everyone's coming together, but we don't necessarily, there's not enough conversation about the dark side of how people mishandle their traumatic experiences.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you asked that question, because that is one of the biggest pieces of my coaching and my speaking is accountability. So after my daughter died and my husband held a gun to my head and I beat the feet, um, I had nobody to hold me accountable. And I don't know if I can say this on your show, but I went buck wild. I I went absolutely crazy. And it was because I felt like, well, I have nobody. My daughter just died, and I have all of these awful, awful feelings, and I don't know what to do with them. And so it was and it, yeah, I became, the town hussy, for lack of a better word. And I didn't care, and I had nobody to say, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, this is not healthy mentally, emotionally, physically. You need to stop, and we need to sit down and really talk about what's happening here." And not in a way that's judgmental, in a way that's loving and kind, and says, you know what? I love you way too much to let you destroy your life in this way. And nobody talks about that. You're right. I don't know of anybody who comes on and says, you have grief and it is valid. But you know what's not valid is that you're letting that grief or that pain or